Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Raymond Peterson.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And I'm their guest and friend, Alan Singer.
We are taping on a Wednesday before what normally would be a Monday air date, but things have been kind of crazy. So we know this will be up on YouTube quite soon and then up on LinkedIn. And at some point, Manhattan Neighborhood Network will be airing this show or a previous show, but we'll try to keep you posted. EVT Educational Productions, Zoom, and Manhattan Neighborhood Network makes all this possible. So, Bob, you're keeping an eye on a bunch of stuff, but before we jump into all that hard news, breaking news with our take on what it all means, I need for us to pay tribute to a good friend and colleague, some of whom you guys probably know from his journalistic photography days and some of his activism. But my good friend and colleague, great photographer Kwame Brathwaite, passed on about 2 weeks ago, the 1st of April. And Kwame and his brother Lumbe were instrumental in making the Black is Beautiful movement actually take fire in the early 60s. And they founded, what do they call it? The African Jazz Art Society and AJAS, African Jazz Art Society. I forget what the other S is. I'll look it up before we end this. And they photographed the Grand Assa models. And the thrust of the Grand Assa models was to elevate Blackness and African heritage. And so the models started wearing their hair natural. They had stuff that was designed by Black designers. And they basically changed the paradigm for what actually was looked at as feminine beauty or just plain beauty. Let me quote a little bit from an NPR story that ran right after he passed.
While you do that, Eric, why don't you share his photo?
I'd have to share screen. Okay, let me get to screen share and go from there. Okay, screen share. Bingo. Here we go. Share. And we see Kwame's photo. Is it up there?
Yeah.
Okay. And then while the photo's up, I'll see what I can do about finding that NPR story, which to pull up the screen may block the photo.
But while you're doing that, we were talking just before we went on air about his not just his photo skills, but his influence on how photos were exposed to aid in the reproduction of Black faces. You were talking about that, Alan, right?
Right. I was a photographer for a community newspaper in Brooklyn. And I worked with another photographer, an African-American guy named Steve Faulding. And what he taught me was something that Kwame had pioneered. And that is that the standard lighting meters on the automatic setting on cameras was designed for white faces. So that if you were taking pictures of African-Americans and whites, you had to go on manual and allow in more light so that the Black face would be clear. And again, it's just the idea that the standard for the technology was always set for whites.
Yeah, this shot, you see this shot that's up there?
Yes.
That model? Can you see it?
So it's still Kwame.
You still seeing Kwame?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, the NPR thing was photographer Kwame Brathwaite, who popularized the Black is Beautiful movement of the 1960s, has died. From Nelson Mandela to Muhammad Ali and the so-called Grand Assa models, Brathwaite's work embraced Black power and beauty. He chronicled events such as the Motown Review at the Apollo in 1963, the Jackson Five's first trip to Africa in '74, and the legendary Muhammad Ali fight, the Rumble in the Jungle. And in recent years, Brathwaite's work has been the subject of exhibitions, books, and even a fashion line created by Rihanna. Didn't know about the Rihanna fashion line, but I know that the New York Historical Society had a phenomenal exhibit of a lot of Kwame's works. And before we finish editing this show and putting it up, I'm going to try to pop in some of those photos from that exhibit so that folks get a sense of how powerful his work was and what those Black women with those natural hairdos, how revolutionary that was, and what a paradigm shift it made in the zeitgeist. It was just some amazing work. And so we can't say enough about what Kwame had to do and what he has done, and he will be missed dearly. But I think his latest photo work was a book that Aperture put out in 2019, aptly titled Black is Beautiful. So I will end the screen share, and then we will segue to our other breaking news stories, some of which are still breaking and some of which are 10 days old but are still in the zeitgeist. Oh, today's my day for zeitgeist. Okay. Bob, you were looking up whether or not one of the municipalities in Tennessee was reinstating one of the ousted members. I know they're probably meeting as we're meeting, and so maybe the second Justin has been reinstated. The earlier Justin was reinstated yesterday, was he not, guys? Raymond, do you remember whether it was yesterday?
Or the day before.
It would have been yesterday. It would have been yesterday. Yeah.
Oh, then
I think Raymond's right. I think it was Monday.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yesterday is gone.
Yeah, okay.
Seems like the day.
Background, which I'm sure everybody knows, is they were ousted, these two young Black members of the Tennessee legislature, because they caused a ruckus in the well of the House. And that was because they would not be recognized when they wanted to discuss the issue of getting Tennessee to pass more rigid gun control legislation. And so they took a bullhorn and did what they did. And they weren't referred to the ethics committee for lack of decorum or whatever the normal due process steps are in the Tennessee House. They were just expelled with a vote that was rammed through the state legislature. But that's part of a pattern, right? Alan, we're talking about a major umbrella of things that are anti-democratic that goes against the norms of a true democracy. And the fact that they did not want to discuss anything about gun control in the Tennessee State House is not surprising, because I guess Tennessee is one of those red states that has a supermajority in their state legislature. And those red states seem to be, they're red because they're GOP controlled, and that's the slang term for GOP controlled grand old party. Republican, let's just call it who they are, controlled legislatures. And our take on this, folks, is that there is a war on the country by Republican state elected officials, Republican governors, and Republican appointed judges. That basically is the umbrella that we're going to use to discuss this show. Alan,
this isn't new to us, right, Eric? This isn't new to us, because you said as much at the in the 2020 election that state legislatures were going to become extra important in simply because they were heavily Republican controlled. And at that point, we didn't know what would happen January 6th. Because there was a danger that that election would be thrown back to the states, which are heavily Republican controlled. So yeah, this is the upshot of these supermajorities and these heavily Republican states.
Bob, you're getting some overmodulation. I'm not sure whether it's because of speaker or whether it's too high a volume, but
well, let me see.
Pick up on what Bob was saying, Alan, because we were talking about this whole,
What's happening in Tennessee is that essentially the rural white population controls the legislatures, and the diverse, really modern urban areas are losing their democratic rights. The legislature is trying to reshape the governing body in Nashville to limit representation. But one of the things that was interesting, Nashville, where Justin Jones was elected as the state rep, Nashville unanimously, black, white, whoever was on the city council, voted to reinstate him. And the mayor of Nashville, who was white, said, this is a man who our citizens elected to represent us. But the Republican state legislature ignored that. One of the things that I found ironic is they claimed that Justin Jones, Justin Peterson, and a white legislature, Gloria Johnson, who they named, they did not expel, had brought dishonor on the House. If the criteria for getting evicted from the legislature is you bring dishonor, I think they should remove every Republican in the United States.
Now, I don't want to paint a broader brush, but Bob, you were talking about one of those young men who basically had stood in the well and said, if what we did was dishonor, we've had members in this body who were brought up on charges and convicted and didn't get expelled. We've had bodies who were investigated for, I guess, something to do with sexual assault. I forget what the crime was, and did not get expelled. So for trying to defend our constituents' rights, dealing with a gun control advocacy, we were expelled. And so he said, I'll take that as dishonor. I'm paraphrasing, if that's dishonor. So, but you were talking about another example, Bob, that Lawrence O'Donnell had raised pertaining to whether or not you want to consider who is dishonorable or who represents the people of their constituents properly within state legislatures.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go back to my notes, which are luckily right in front of me. But Lawrence O'Donnell had a great segment. And is my audio still okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. He had a great segment the other day, and he analyzed what happened on the floor of the Tennessee chamber. And as I look this up, I should remind the Shelby County commissioners are voting as we tape right now on whether to return Justin Peterson to the House, to the legislature. And I just want to, before I read this, just pick out from the bill that's on the floor right now as we tape. It says, whereas State House Representative Justin Peterson was duly elected by the citizens of State House District 86, and overwhelmingly the voters of this district want him to continue serving on this board on their behalf. And whereas the Shelby County Board of Commissioners does not condone the removal of any duly elected official solely to issues of decorum or any such issues that does not directly impact the fitness of office for said official, which is a great line. But in Lawrence O'Donnell picked out the Speaker of the Tennessee House, Mr. Sexton, and said that he's the 21st century version of Bull Connor. And those, those who know what we're talking about.
Viewers would have to let people know who Bull Connor was.
Yes,
quick history lesson, folks. That's the guy handling all the dogs that they were sicking on the voting rights protesters back in the 60s in Alabama. Was it Montgomery?
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And
it was the guy launching the water cannons, bowling over young students.
Yep.
With giant water cannons, knocking them off their feet, sicking dogs on them. So that's basically a pretty apt comparison, I would think. If you take a duly elected state official and say, oh yeah, you brought a bullhorn, we're going to kick you out of your representative rights to serve your constituents. Yeah, extreme to say the least. Now, this is just Tennessee. If we look at, that's the legislature. Let's go to the gubernatorial side, the executive branch. Or we could stay, yeah, gubernatorial branch. Let's go to Texas because Texas is famous for their anti-abortion laws, restricting the rights of women to an abortion. They're the ones that put out that bounty hunter law where somebody's neighbor could actually turn them in and get a $10,000 bounty, correct? Yes, yeah. We talked about that on Media Watch when they passed that law. Then a bunch of folks filed a suit and went judge shopping, and they went judge shopping to this judge in Amarillo, Texas. I don't even want to call up his name, but this is the judge that they liked because I think he was a Trump appointee, and there isn't an abortion ruling that will knock down a woman's right to abortion he doesn't like. And he basically said the FDA was wrong when 25 years ago it allowed mifepristone. I think I managed to get that pronounced well. The drug, so women could have their abortions at less risk to themselves and not clog up the medical system in discussion with their doctors. And so he banned that drug. And of course, the fallout has been like nonstop. Women's rights groups are up in arms. Women have been in the streets demonstrating. Hey, look, talk to me about this and the conflicting other judge.
Well, I mean, go ahead, Alan. No, go ahead.
I think the key thing is he is a federal judge, but from a lower court. What gives him the authority to, for one, he's not a scientist, but basically, if this goes through, it destroys the ability of the federal government, not just to allow women to terminate a pregnancy, but it undermines the ability of the federal government to regulate medicine and food in the United States. This is a law, this is the federal law that allows the drug regulation that dates back, I believe, to 1906. Mm-hmm. So with this, one individual decided that he had the right to throw out more than 100 years of federal protection to ensure that people had safe medication. And again,
that's what I was going to say, Alan. I was going to say the danger here is the precedent. I mean, imagine if one lower federal judge said, you know what, I don't think these COVID drugs are ready. That would have, think of how badly things would have gotten pushed back, or no, nobody should have to wear a mask, or any other decision that the FDA might have supported. So yeah, that would be it is a horrible precedent that he did it, period. Hopefully the mid-court, the appeals court will turn it back before the Supreme Court has to deal with it.
There are two things that, one, another federal judge actually came out and said, no, we do not want that to be the ruling from the federal bench. And so he passed a ruling that's applicable to about 17 states, I'm not sure, that says, forget that, FDA, you keep putting this drug out there and make sure that women can have access to it if they need. And because people are worried about the Texas judge's ruling, I know here in New York, our governor has already stocked up on a ton of the pill.
A 4-year supply.
Yeah, so that women can have access to it in New York State, whether this judge ruling ends up in the next level. It's going to another level, but because there are two different rulings from two separate federal judges, all the legal experts are saying it's going to end up in the Supreme Court. This Supreme Court is not known for ruling on the merits of law. They're known for ruling on the merits of what does their right-wing conservative constituency seem to want. And so the fact that it might end up in the Supreme Court does not leave me with any positive feelings whatsoever, because I do not trust John Roberts and those 5 other conservative judges to deal with the merits of a case on the basis of law, because they have shown that from the time they decided Citizens United that a corporation was a person, they have shown that they have had a predilection for all the right-wing leaning, big business, anti-abortion rulings. And correct me if I'm wrong, folks. Raymond, you got something that you wanted to?
Not at the moment.
The Supreme Court, as usual, bottoms out with Clarence Thomas. So we can count on him to be of no assistance should it reach that level.
Say it again, Bob. I think you broke up a little.
Okay, I'll say it slower. I just said that the Supreme Court, as usual, bottoms out with Clarence Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a conservative court. It's a right-wing ideological court that is trying to, as Eric said, trying to enforce its point of view on the nation, and it's very scary.
Yeah, I worry for the future, because a lot of these rulings are definitely not scientifically based, not democratically or legally grounded, and so the fact that this court goes the way it does not bode well for us. Now, to get to the executive side of things, that was the judicial side in Texas. The executive side, Governor Greg Abbott just jumped into dispel or negate a murder conviction that a duly impaneled jury in the state of Texas brought in a verdict of murder against I believe, Army sergeant who, on his day off or whatever, drove through a bunch of Black Lives Matter protesters. After texting or posting online, I might have to kill 1 or 2 of them because they're demonstrating outside my house. And when they tried him for the murder he committed, because one of the protesters that tried to stop him from driving into, with his car, a group of protesters, one of them actually legally had a AR-15 weapon, and this guy pulled out his pistol and shot this man dead and told the cops, well, I had to get him before he aimed at me. And so when the prosecution brought all this evidence before the jury didn't think twice. Both men were armed, but the guy who shot the man dead because he said he had to get him before he aimed at me, they convicted him of murder. And the faux new pundit Tucker Carlson screamed on his show, how dare them convict this man of murder? What is, because Kyle Rittenhouse got off, and so they expected this guy to get off. And when the Texas jury convicted of murder, the right-wing media echo chamber was incensed, led by Tucker Carlson, talking about what is Governor Greg Abbott going to do about this miscarriage of justice? Hey, the jury weighed the evidence. They brought in a verdict of guilty. Well, no sooner had Carlson said that than up jumps Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, saying, I'll pardon him. Well, guess what? The man hadn't even been put in jail and hadn't even received whatever due process comes about whether the sentence was right or not right, etc. You know, so
yeah. Governor Abbott tweeted, that Texas has one of the strongest stand your ground laws of self-defense that cannot be nullified by a jury or a progressive district attorney. That's what he writes. Juries have the right to decide a trial, not not the governor who has a different opinion. So
what's interesting is Travis County, the demographics of the county, it's 48% white, 33% Latino. It's not a black county. It wasn't a black jury. These were people, not Black Lives Matter people, who sifted through the evidence and said, you shot before he could aim. Well, that means he wasn't aiming at you and you just killed him. And you're guilty of murder.
Yeah, yeah, that's what they brought in the verdict. But the governor, thanks to Tucker Carlson, said, I'll pardon him. And I believe the DA said, you know, we need to get whatever governing body that deals with sentencing in this country to at least do their job before the governor steps into our legal process. But it's a part of a pattern that we've been talking about, that martyrizing these people like Kyle Rittenhouse and this, what's this guy? I didn't want to know his name. This sergeant. And interesting enough, the
Daniel Perry.
This Perry guy was also shot. Another white Texan who was basically an Air Force veteran. So you have an Army sergeant shooting an Air Force veteran, and the jury said, "Yeah, he murdered him. Send him to jail." And now the governor says, "We're going to nullify that because I'm ready to pardon him." We'll see how that all turns out.
And we have about a minute and a half left.
Are you guys noticing a pattern? And we didn't even get to. We got to the anti-abortion. We didn't get to the LGBTQ warfare. How many new LGBTQ laws have been passed by red states and other like-minded people, Alan?
Well, they haven't been all passed, but they're
introduced.
452 anti-LGBTQ plus laws introduced in state legislatures in 44 states. Now, they're not going to get passed in most of them, but this is insane. It's like, that's the big problem facing the United States. You know, this guy, Jordan from the House, is attacking Bragg in New York, saying, well, you should be dealing with crime, not Trump. Well, these people are all dealing with bathrooms, not the problems that are impacting on their states.
Yeah, I guess we're about out of time, but this seems to be a GOP game plan. Let's attack everybody and let's attack everything. Women, abortion rights, voting rights, LGBTQ rights. I throw up my hands. We're out of time, folks. This has been Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Raymond Peterson.
Bob Anthony. Catch up to us on YouTube at Media Watch EVT.
And I'm their guest and friend, Alan Singer. Thank you for having me today.
Thanks again, folks. We'll catch you the next time, and stay safe.